Questions to the Prime Minister. Katie Clark.
Number one, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm sure the whole House will wish to join me in wishing the England football team the very best of British before their first World Cup game this Saturday in Brazil. Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others, and in addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
Katie Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I wish every football team in the World Cup every luck. Less than a quarter of people who have applied for the new personal independence payment have received a decision, and if we continue at this rate, it's going to take more than 40 years to get to the point where everyone gets assessed. Does the Prime Minister think that's acceptable, and what is he going to do about it?
Well, first of all, it's extremely important when we introduce these new benefits that we make sure it is done in a way that works well. So I would say it's very important not to have an artificial deadline of replacing one benefit with another. The whole point about the personal independence payment is it is more accurate and more targeted than disability living allowance. It will mean more help for those with the greatest disabilities, and I'm determined we get it right.
Mr. Brooks Newmark.
Would the Prime Minister join me in congratulating the Foreign Secretary on organising this week's important global summit to end sexual violence and agree it is indeed time to act?
I think it's huge credit to the Foreign Secretary for the work that he has done, but also I'd like to pay tribute to all of the NGOs across various countries of the world who've all come together for this extraordinary summit in London. It is absolutely vital that we never forget about the victims of sexual violence in conflict. This is something that is still far too prevalent in our world, but real advances have been made by having a declaration that countries are signing up to, and then even more important, an action plan of how to gather evidence, prosecute the wrongdoers and make sure they are properly punished while helping the survivors. And listening to the testimony of survivors yesterday in Downing Street was immensely powerful.
Mr. Ed Miliband.
Mr. Speaker, let me first join the Prime Minister in wishing the England team the best of luck in the World Cup. The whole of the country will, I'm sure, be behind them. Now, Mr. Speaker, everybody will have been concerned about what has been happening at certain schools in Birmingham, including girls being forced to sit at the back of the class and the forced removal of head teachers. Mr. Speaker, at the heart of this story is a failure of accountability locally and nationally. But the key question for parents is this: if there is a serious problem at their school, where do they go to get it sorted out?
Well, first of all, let me echo what the Right Honourable Member has said about how important it is to get a grip of this issue. The problem of Islamist extremism in our schools is serious. The situation, not just in Birmingham, but elsewhere this has happened, is extremely serious, and I am absolutely determined, as is the Home Secretary, as is the Education Secretary, indeed the whole government, to make sure this is unacceptable in our country. People should be being taught in our schools in a way that makes sure they can play a full part in the life of our country. Now, in terms of where you go to if you are concerned about what is happening in your school, the first place to go is to the head teacher and to the chair of governors. And while I hope we can forge real unity across the House of Commons on combating Islamist extremism in our schools, I hope that it isn't used as an agenda to try and knock down successful school formats, whether academies created under the last government or free schools created under this government.
Well, Mr. Speaker, there's certainly a degree of common ground on what our kids are taught in schools and having a proper upholding of values. But the Prime Minister said that people should go to the head teacher or the chair of governors. Well, in certain cases, the head teacher was removed and the governing body was part of the problem. And the truth is, Mr. Speaker, it's a very hard question to answer as to who parents could go to, because we have an incredibly fragmented school system where no one is properly responsible. Now, some of the schools were local authority schools, and some of them Some of the schools were local authority schools and some of them were academies. But what parents want is someone responsible on a day-to-day basis who can intervene quickly when things go wrong. Now, doesn't there need to be one system of accountability for all schools to safeguard the education of our children?
As I said, the first port of call is the head teacher and the chair of governors. If people believe there is a real problem, there is one organisation that has responsibility for checking standards in all of these schools, and that, of course, is Ofsted. And that is why it's so important what the Education Secretary has said about no-notice inspections. What the Leader of the Opposition just asked is, how can this happen quickly? Well, it will happen quickly if we have these no-notice inspections. Now, the point I would make to the Leader of the Opposition, because this is an important debate, is that if we are saying there is only one model of accountability that will work, and some people in this House believe the only model of accountability is local government accountability, it is worth making the point that Birmingham City Council failed in their duty to these parents. And indeed, when we look at what it was that caused action to happen, it was only when the Department of Education was contacted that proper action was taken. So yes, let's learn the lessons, and let's listen to the Permanent Secretary of the Education Department when he reports, but let us learn the right lessons.
Miliband.
It is definitely worth making the point about local authorities and academies, and that's why I made the point. But on the issue of Ofsted inspections, they may happen only once every 5 years. That is not the kind of system of accountability that you need. Now, here's the thing, Mr. Speaker. Here's the thing that I think we should be able to agree on. Nobody surely believes that the Department of Education can run 20,000 schools from Whitehall. Now, maybe the Secretary of State believes that, but I don't think you can possibly really believe that. But nobody is arguing either to go back to the old local authority system. Isn't it time? Isn't it time? Isn't it time, if they just listen to the question, isn't it time for a proper system of local oversight, separate from councils, responsible for standards at all schools, to prevent what happened in Birmingham happening elsewhere?
I have to say, I always listen very carefully to his proposals, but this sounds like creating a new local bureaucracy when we need to make sure that the resources are going into the schools for the teachers and the computers and the books and the equipment. And he says that an Ofsted inspection can only take place every 5 years. The point about these no-notice inspections, if we're going to give this issue the attention it deserves, that a report and a suspicion to Ofsted about these problems could result in an instant inspection and instant action. Let me make just one other point, because it's often said that some of these new formats for schools, free schools or academies, which I thought the party opposite, well, they used to when they were sensible, still supported, that they don't act as fast as local authority schools. In fact, completely the opposite is the case. When there's been a problem in free schools or in converter academies, far faster action has been taken than many of the local authority schools that have been left in a state of failure for far too long.
I do have to say to him that he has no answer on this question of accountability, because it isn't realistic to do it centrally, and Ofsted inspections are just not going to do the job, and everybody knows it. Now, Mr. Speaker, I want to turn from the failures in the Education Department to the failures in the Home Office. Can the Prime Minister update the House on his latest estimate of the backlog of people waiting for their passport applications to be processed?
The situation with the passport agency is extremely important that we get it right, because I understand people are anxious, they want to get their passport, they want to be able to go on holiday. Let me give him the facts. That we have 300,000 extra applications than is normal at this time of year. We've increased massively the staff. The level of applications outside the normal 3-week limit is less than the 10% of that 300,000.
Mr. Speaker, the truth is that is tens of thousands of people who are finding that their holidays are being cancelled because they're not actually getting a passport. And he says that they've increased the resources. They've increased the resources at the passport agency. That is not the case. There are greater responsibilities for the passport agency since 2010 and fewer resources. Now, will the Prime Minister tell the House When did the government first know about this problem, and how has it been allowed to develop?
The government has taken action to deal with this problem, not today, but in weeks gone past. We've got 250 staff already redeployed to the front line, prioritising all outstanding applications. That will allow for an extra 25,000 examinations weekly. Look, he asked the questions. People will be concerned about this. They will want to hear the answers.
Order. That is certainly true. And can I say to Mr. Robertson, you do have something of a lion's roar. And it rather lets you down, because I can hear very clearly it's you. And as for you, Mr. Lucas, I've told you need to go on some sort of therapeutic training course if you're to attain the level of statesmanship to which you aspire. Let's hear the answer. The Prime Minister.
The government has made sure, as I said, 250 extra staff deployed, longer opening hours at the Passport Office, 7 days a week, 650 extra staff on the helplines to support customers, and the Home Secretary has announced today that new offices will be opened in Liverpool next week with an additional 100 staff. The Home Office has been on this from the very start, but it all begins with 300,000 extra people applying for passports compared with the previous time last year. Those are the actions that are being taken. I hope he will be careful not to try and frighten people in the way that he did with his opening question.
Miliband.
Mr. Speaker, he says the government is sorting out the problem, but there are tens of thousands of people who we understand are waiting for their applications to be processed, and who are finding that their holidays are being cancelled. And the truth of the picture of this government is we have the Home Secretary fighting with the Education Secretary, but not paying attention to the business of government. And here's the thing, Mr. Speaker, to add insult to injury, people are being told if they want their applications processed in the 3-week target, they have to pay £55 extra. Can the Prime Minister get a grip on this situation and tell families when is the backlog going to be cleared?
We will be clearing this backlog, not least because we're not wasting time with a national identity card scheme that we inherited from the party opposite. But isn't it interesting? Isn't it interesting, Mr. Speaker? Not a word about the unemployment figures. He simply cannot bear the fact that in our country we've now got 2 million more people in work in the private sector. He cannot stand the fact that unemployment has fallen yet again. The claimant count has come down. He's absolutely allergic to good news because he knows that as our economy gets stronger, he gets weaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's now 28 years since the devastating accident happened in Chernobyl, and the effects are still being felt today, particularly by children. Last year, we ceased to supply gratis visas to children from the affected regions to come to the UK for respite care while many were dying. Will the PM re-look at our policy, because since charging for these visas, we've seen a 50% reduction in these young people being able to come to the UK for respite?
Well, I'm very happy to look at the case that he raises, and we all remember the appalling incident that took place at Chernobyl and the long-term effects that it had on people. Obviously, we charge for visas because we have to cover the cost of the visa operations to make sure that we're protecting ourselves from people who shouldn't come here but do come here, and that's important. But I'll look carefully at what he said, and perhaps I'll write to him.
Mr. Barry Sherman.
Mr. Speaker, will the Prime Minister agree with me that now more than ever we need to bend our efforts to build a strong, robust civil society? 100 years ago, this August, a war broke out, killed 16 million, mainly young men, but devastated communities. The lack of active participation in politics is declining rapidly. Only 34% of people voted in the recent Euro elections. Can he agree with me to meet on a cross-party basis, to look at citizenship in this country in a serious way, so we could look at how we build a society that encourages active citizenship?
No, well, I agree with what the right honourable gentleman says. The turnout at some of these elections is very depressing. I think people feel, with respect to the European elections, that these institutions are rather distant from them and they don't see the relevance of them. Of course, I'm happy to look at what he says about citizenship, but I would prefer that we put our resources and effort into practical programmes, things like National Citizen Service, which is, I think, now a superb service that many young people are taking part in, so they can see the importance of engaging in their communities, engaging in the world, and that, I think, will lead, among other things, to greater political participation.
Graham Evans.
Will the Prime Minister join me in welcoming the 2 million new private sector jobs that have been created since 2010? And will he continue with the long-term economic plan to make sure that figure will go up?
Well, I think my honourable friend makes this is an important milestone that we've reached, which is there are now 2 million more private sector jobs than when this government came to office. That is 2 million reasons for sticking to the long-term economic plan that we've set out. Can I thank him particularly for the work that he has done for his constituents in Weaver Vale in terms of running job club after job club to help make sure that the businesses that need more workers are put in touch with the people looking for a job. It's a vitally important service that members of Parliament are delivering, and he's leading the way.
Nigel Dodds.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Given the revelation that the royal prerogative of mercy has been granted in at least 16 cases relating to terrorism in the days and weeks immediately following the Belfast Agreement, and indeed cases stretching back to the 1980s, would the Prime Minister agree, in the interests of openness, transparency, and not least in the interests of justice to the victims in Northern Ireland, and indeed cases here in Britain itself, that he should be intervening to ensure that the names and circumstances of these exercise of royal prerogative of mercy should be revealed, as it is in the rest of the United Kingdom, so that people will know the facts of these cases?
Well, I will look, as I always do, very carefully at what the honourable gentleman says about this. But what I would say is that the last government did have to make very difficult decisions to try to get the peace process started by John Major on track and working. I don't want to unpick all of those difficult decisions or second-guess those difficult decisions, because what we have in Northern Ireland now, yes, we have frustrations and difficulties and many other issues that still need to be settled, but we have the basic architecture of devolution and parties working together across historic divides, and I don't want to put that at risk.
Chris Skidmore.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today's employment figures show that unemployment in Kingswood is down by 37% since May 2010. And as the local MP for Kingswood, since 2012 I've held 8 jobs fairs, advertising hundreds of local jobs. Just some of the 2 million private sector jobs been created since this government. But there is still more to do. Together with the Kingswood Job Centre, I'm launching the Kingswood Challenge today, a mentoring or job fostering scheme where local business leaders will be paired with local people looking for work, helping to provide them with one-to-one support.
Well, can I thank my honourable friend for what he's doing in terms of these job fairs to put people who want work in touch with businesses. And this is absolutely key, because there is no complacency on this side of the House about unemployment whatsoever. Youth unemployment, long-term unemployment, we still need to remove these scourges from our country. We have a goal of full employment, and the way we'll achieve that goal is not simply through a growing economy, now growing faster than other countries in the G7, but also by making sure we help people, train people, and give them all that's necessary to get on and get a job and have that security and stability in their lives.
Ian Lavery.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Shockingly, 1 in 3 children in the North East are now living in poverty. It's the highest rate in the UK. And significantly, 2 out of 3 young people who are living in poverty are living in working households now. Would the Prime Minister agree with me that something has went wrong, sadly, with regard to child poverty? And can he say, please, please, tell me where it all went wrong in the first place?
What I would say to the honourable gentleman is the best route out of poverty is work. And if we look at the North East, the number of people employed in the North East is up by 47,000 over the last year. That's what's happening in the North East. Now, I know that Labour want to have this narrative in our country, but let me give them some facts. Inequality is at its lowest since 1986. There are 300,000 fewer children in child poverty than when I became Prime Minister. There are 500,000 fewer people in relative poverty than at the election. That is what is happening, but above all...
Mr. Campbell, when you're eating curry, order! When you're eating curry in the Kennington Tandoori, you don't yell across the restaurant, don't yell across the floor of this House. The Prime Minister.
What we need to do is to tackle the causes of poverty: underachievement at school, homelessness, lack of work, drug addiction. That is what drives this government. That is what we're dealing with, and there are 250,000 fewer children in failing schools than when this government took office.
Mr. Alan Reid.
Mr. Speaker, ATOS are taking even longer to carry out medical assessments of applicants for disability benefits who live in Argyll and Bute than they do for people living elsewhere. This is because they are very reluctant to send assessors the distance to Argyll and Bute. I'm sure the Prime Minister will agree this is unacceptable, but will he tell ATOS that they must not discriminate against people living in Argyll and Bute in this way, and they must receive their assessments as quickly as people in the rest of the country?
No, well, obviously there are challenges in particularly far-flung rural constituencies like his with so many islands within it, and I accept we have to make sure that those people get their assessments properly carried out. But these assessments are important. The whole point about this government's programme is that we don't want to leave people on unemployment or other benefits year after year. We want these tests and assessments properly carried out so we can see whether they are applicable for benefits and what help they need to get work.
Dr. Alan Whitehead.
Did the Prime Minister's intention to legislate to help people with the cost and insecurity of renting their homes lose its slot in a packed Queen's Speech legislative programme to plan to ban plastic bags, or did he perhaps not have any proposals in the first place?
What this government is doing is making sure we build more houses. That is what we absolutely need to do to help either those who are renting or buying. Yes, we need greater transparency in terms of what letting agencies do, and we are delivering that. That is part of our programme. But I don't believe a policy of rent controls, which the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors and letting agents themselves have said would put up rents, is the answer.
Jason McCartney.
Mr. Speaker, metal fabricators, hydraulic fitters, CNC turners, mechanical engineers and vehicle maintenance apprenticeships are just some of the real jobs for local people on offer at my jobs fair in Home. With the news that 2 million private sector jobs have been created since 2010, will the Prime Minister continue to support SMEs in Yorkshire who are creating real jobs and quality apprenticeships?
Absolutely, I will. And the point my honourable friend makes is a good one, which is we are seeing a rebalancing of our economy. Just this week, seeing manufacturing figures with a growth in manufacturing. We've seen all those elements of GDP, construction, manufacturing growing. And what we want to see is a recovery that is broadly based across the different sectors and every part of the country. And when it comes to the figures today, you can actually see pay levels in industries like manufacturing and services rather than financial services on the rise.
Emma Llewellyn-Buck.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Last week, the Right Honourable Member for Rushcliffe said that people in the UK have not yet felt any sense of recovery. And today, the ONS confirmed that in the North East, full-time workers are £36 a week worse off than they were last year. Does the Prime Minister agree with his Cabinet colleague?
Well, the point I'd make to the Honourable Lady is I just said there are 47,000 more people in work in the North East than there were a year ago. The best route out of poverty is work, and what that needs to be followed by are the tax reductions that this government is bringing on to make sure that you're in work and better off in work. That's going to make a difference.
Mike Freer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Pentland are a company based in my constituency. They increased their turnover by 10% to over £2 billion last year and increased their workforce significantly, contributing to the 2 million private sector jobs created under this government. On top of that, they've just been voted European Family Business of the Year. Will my right honourable friend join me in congratulating Pentland and agree to visit this British success story?
I'm sure I'll be visiting my honourable friend's constituency before long, but I join him in congratulating this great British company. I believe they came with me on my visit to China, where we were pushing Speedos as hard as we could, including getting them on the vital Chinese equivalent to Amazon to make sure that they can be sold. Very happy to come and visit. This is part of the economic success story and export success story of our country.
Dame Tessa Jowell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On Monday, I am going to the United Nations to address a number of member states and to present a cross-party petition in support of the inclusion of the right to healthy early childhood in the new post-2015 Millennium Development Goals. This petition has been signed by people from 170 countries around the world. Can I therefore ask the Prime Minister to support, with his advocacy and the support of his government, this leadership by the United Nations to create benefit for at least 200 million of the world's poorest children?
Now, when I pay tribute to the Right Honourable Lady and what she is doing in this area, Britain has tried to play a leading role in making sure that the world has a good replacement for the Millennium Development Goals, and I co-authored a report with others about what should be put in their place. At the heart of this was the idea of better maternal health and better health services, particularly for women in childbirth. I'm very happy to look at the proposal that she makes and make sure we put the full weight of the British government behind it.
Mr. Mel Stride.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Could I join my right honourable friend in wishing the England football team every success in the World Cup? But could I also raise one of the darker aspects of the beautiful game? Mr. Speaker, recently my constituent Donald Diston was seriously assaulted whilst refereeing a local football game by one of the players on the field. He was very seriously injured. Could I therefore ask the Prime Minister what steps the government is taking to ensure that violence, whether it occurs on the field or off the field, is treated with equal seriousness and is never tolerated?
My honourable friend makes an important point, which is that, of course, we all support the England football team. It's good to say that again. But it is really important that we crack down on all forms of bad behaviour, whether on or off the football pitch. Referees should have the full protection of the law to ensure community football is safe and enjoyable. I would pay tribute to the FA for all the work that they've done in terms of training, but also explaining the importance of respect and good behaviour in our game. But we need more of that in the years to come.
Pamela Nash.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm afraid I might have nightmares this evening about the Prime Minister modelling Speedos on his world tour, but I thank him for sharing that image with us. On a much more serious note, Mr. Speaker, in Scotland alone, since this Prime Minister took office, the number of people reporting to have been forced into using loan sharks has went up 57%. In fact, it's estimated there's a total of 85,000 people in Scotland in this predicament. Can I ask the Prime Minister what his government is going to do about this, or does he think that this is acceptable?
Well, first of all, let me reassure the Honourable Lady that Speedos do actually make shorts as well as Speedos, so she's, I hope I can clear that picture out of her mind. On this issue, look, there's a series of issues that honourable members quite rightly raise that we need to properly tackle to make sure that we help everyone in our country benefit from economic recovery. On the minimum wage, which was declining when I became Prime Minister, it is now increasing. On 0 hours contract, nothing done under the last government, now legislation to get rid of exclusivity. On payday lending, nothing done in the last 13 years, now being properly regulated with a cap on payday lending. On minimum wage, we've also made sure that the penalties for not paying the minimum wage have been quadrupled under this government. I'm absolutely determined to make sure that everyone who wants to work hard and do the right thing can benefit from the economic recovery now underway.
Sir Tony Mowbray.
The Prime Minister must know that every member of this House collectively and jointly shares a total repugnance that a young woman has been sentenced to 100 lashes and the death penalty simply for wanting to practice her faith. Will my right honourable friend request the UK delegation to the United Nations Council on Human Rights to press the case that the concept of apostasy is in direct and total conflict with Article 18 of the United Nations Convention on Human Rights? And will my right honourable friend reassure the House that the Sudanese government will be left in no doubt as the abhorrence in which this sentence is held?
Well, I think my right honourable friend speaks for the whole House on this issue. I completely share his abhorrence about the way this case has been treated. It has been absolutely barbaric and it has no place in this world. I can confirm we will be raising this case at the forthcoming UN Human Rights Council. Sudan is firmly on the agenda at this council, and I think we should bring the full weight of everything Britain can do to make clear to that country the totally unacceptable way in which this woman is being treated.
Mike Kane.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It was good of the Prime Minister to wish the England team every success in the forthcoming World Cup. But with his cabinet split and his coalition fractured, should he not be picking up the phone to Roy Hodgson and asking for some tips on team discipline?
Well, I wouldn't want to offer Roy too much advice. But what I would say about this government, we've had the same Chancellor for 4 years and we've got record growth in our country. We've had the same Home Secretary for 4 years and we've had record falls of crime in our country. We've had the same Education Secretary and we've got 250,000 fewer children in failing schools. I say, if you've got a strong team with a strong plan, stick with the team, stick with the plan and keep on putting it in the back of the net.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister will have heard calls from honourable members on all sides of this House for an independent inquiry on the Hillsborough model into organised child sexual abuse in this country. Can he truly be satisfied that current police investigations are sufficient for the public to have confidence that we are both willing and able to get to the truth?
I think my honourable friend makes a very important point, and I've looked at this carefully with ministerial colleagues because, of course, we have a series of inquiries taking place into what happened in various hospitals and care homes and indeed media organisations. And I think it's very important the government keeps a clear view about how these are being coordinated and how the lessons are being learned. If there is a need for any more overarching process to be put in place, I'm very happy to look at that. But at the moment, I think led by the Home Secretary and her colleagues, we do have a proper view of what's happening at all these organisations.
Debbie Abrahams.
Recent analysis has shown that the Labour Party's policy to allocate NHS funding based on health need actually reduced health inequalities by 85%. Why did the government scrap it?
Why? What this government has done is actually to make sure that public health budgets are properly ring-fenced and to deliver the money according to need to the various areas of the country. The only part of the country I'm aware where Labour policy is put in place is in Wales, where they haven't actually hit a health target since about 1989, and where experts are saying people are dying because of the length of time they spend on waiting lists. So if she's concerned about Labour health policy, I think Cardiff would be a good place to start.
Brendan Jones!
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Youth unemployment in Harrogate and Knaresborough today stands at 50. That's not a percent, it's the total, and it's down 83% since 2010. Reflects the 2 million new private sector jobs created since then. So will my right honourable friend be building upon this success by providing more opportunities and skills for the young people in our area by expanding traineeships and apprenticeships?
I think my honourable friend is absolutely right that even though 50 is a very small number of people to be young and unemployed in Harrogate, it's still 50 too many. And our ambition in the next Parliament should be to make sure that everyone has the chance either of going to university or taking on apprenticeship, and we leave absolutely no one behind as they leave school and look for the stability and security that a future in work provides.
Seabeck.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This government said it was going to recruit 11,000 new reserves to make up for the cuts to the regular army. What in fact has happened, according to the National Audit Office report today, is the number has actually declined since 2012. Is he content to continue to preside over not only a debacle in passports, but this further example of his government's incompetence and, frankly, buck-passing?
I'm afraid to say to the honourable lady, what we inherited in terms of defence was not only a 38 military reserves where they'd been under-resourced and undervalued for years. We now have a 5-year programme for building them up. That programme is underway. It is gathering pace, and what we're going to see is the strongest possible professional army with all of the best equipment that they could have, and a very strong reserve force backing them up, making sure that we can meet all of the obligations we set out in the Strategic Defence Review.
Order.